What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today we are answering a rather important question. What's the best turn 1 card in Keyforge? You see, usually with these kind of card games, think Transformers, think Pokemon, I would be looking at decks, how to construct decks, cards you should play together, etc. But you see, Keyforge is a unique deck game, which means that there is no deck building. So we need to find other important questions to answer. This is a good one. I was actually going to put this poll into the Facebook group over on Keyforge, but the lovely Paul Solomon has actually done it for us. Cheers, dude. Now, if you're unaware, the turn 1 rules of Keyforge are a little bit weird because they're trying to balance it out. So if you go first, you have 7 cards, but you can only play one of them. And if you go second, you only have 6 cards, but you can play as many as you like of the active house that you select. So if you're going first and you can only play a single card, you really want to make it count. So we'll do a top 5 list, but let's do some honourable mentions as we go. First honourable mention here, Restringuntus from Dis. It is a creature. Always nice to have a creature on the field, even if it is pitifully weak. But when you play it, you basically define the house your opponent is allowed to use, and until they destroy Restringuntus, they cannot choose any other house. You, I believe, get a couple minutes to look at their deck list at the beginning of a game. So if you see that there are cards in one particular house you don't want to face, or indeed there's one particular house against which you think you'll be good, or you're not scared, play Restringuntus and make sure they either avoid the house you don't want them to use or have to use the card that you do. Ladies and gentlemen, fun times. How about Tentacus? I like Tentacus, ladies and gentlemen. It's a discard, it's got 5 power, and your opponent has to pay you 1 Ember in order to use an artifact. It's nice to get this one down on turn 1. It's a decently powerful creature. 5 power's not terrible. But what I really like here is it basically says to your opponent, you've got to take this out. For the rest of the game, if you don't take this out, you're basically not going to be able to use an artifact. One of my decks has 2 Tentacus in, and when I play against my wife, if one of us gets 2 Tentacus down, it basically means artifacts are off the board because you've got to pay 2 Ember to actually use them. But on turn 1, it's quite nice. It changes the way your opponent's going to play. It's going to really put them off playing artifacts here. And I think probably our final honourable mention here, Mushroom Man. It is an untamed. It is a creature with 2 power, which isn't great. But Mushroom Man gets +3 power for each unforged key you have. Yeah. So if you drop him nice and early on in the game, you have 11 power. That's going to take down a bunch of creatures before it gets taken down itself. Or you just reap every turn and go, ha, you can't KO me. It's quite nice. It gets progressively worse and worse and worse as the game goes along. But having it down on turn 1, ready to use on turn 2 is pretty nice. But I think these 5 next cards really do put themselves in an absolutely phenomenal position. Although 2 of them I cannot figure out the order at all. So in at number 5, we've got Combat Pheromones. It is a Mars artifact. Good news, you get an Ember bonus when you play it. Yay! And it's got an Omni ability. Omni abilities can be used regardless of your active house. You have to sacrifice Combat Pheromones, but remember when you run out of cards in your deck, you shuffle your discard and it becomes your deck. So actually, if you do it nice and early, it might come back round again. And you can use up to 2 other Mars cards this turn. So if you can get Combat Pheromones down turn 1, you get their Ember bonus, nice. But it means then on turn 2, you pick a non-Mars house as your active house. You can use all the cards you want from that, and it means that you can also use 2 Mars cards as well. You're not going to have a big explosive turn 1 if you go first. That's okay. But playing this down on turn 1 means that there's an excellent chance that you may actually have a big turn 2. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm totally okay with that. In at number 4, we see Mother. Mother's a good card. Mother is a creature. 5 power. 5 power's fine. It's bigger than a bunch of Pokemon, but it's not exactly particularly impressive. Decent attacker, not great. What is great is the permanent skill, permanent ability, call it what you will, that lets you draw 1 extra card during your draw card step. I know, right? Instead of refilling to 7 cards like you usually would, you refill to 8. And this is every single turn. So it gets you 1 extra card for the beginning of turn 2, but then it gets you an extra card for the beginning of turn 3. It's another one of these creatures where you put it down on the field and your opponent might not want to take it out. You might have other creatures which are better for reaping. Maybe they've got reaping abilities. You might have other creatures which pose more of an offensive threat, but your opponent has to take down Mother or you're getting a card advantage every single turn. I cannot decide what comes in at number 3 and what comes in at number 2. So honestly, ladies and gentlemen, it really does go, it could go either way. But I am just about, and it's so close, but in at number 3, I'm going to put the Terror. I have the Terror in at least one of my decks, and oh my lordy, is it a great turn 1 card. It's a 5 power creature, again, not amazing, but fine. If you play it and your opponent has no Ember, you gain 2. That's just ridiculous. You just get 2 Ember for playing the creature, and then it's still on the field. You can still use it to fight, you can still use it to reap, etc. Now, the reason this comes in at number 3 rather than number 2, your opponent on their first turn, if you go first, remember, this is a video about the best turn 1 cards going first. If your opponent doesn't play something with an Ember bonus, or another way to get Ember on turn 1, which they won't always do, then the Terror is just as good turn 2, whereas our number 2 card really is a proper job turn 1 card. Yes, there's a decent chance your opponent is able to get an Ember turn 1, and if they do, they do. But then again, maybe your opponent forges a key and they don't have any Ember. I don't know. There might be a situation where your opponent has no Ember other than on turn 1, and that's why the Terror comes in at number 3, but it's super close, and it's a phenomenal turn 1 card. In at number 2, Treasure Map. Treasure Map is about a redonk card on turn 1 as you can get. Although it's only number 2, so maybe it's not about as redonk. It's close, though. You get an Ember bonus. When you play it, you get an Ember. But essentially, if it's the only card you play this turn, you get free Ember. You can only play it if you've not played any other cards, and then you cannot play any other cards. To put it simply, Treasure Map is a phenomenal card, but you are only allowed to play this and you cannot play any other cards during your entire turn. Well, gee whiz. That's turn 1. Turn 1, you're not allowed to play any other cards. Turn 1, you are trapped into a situation where you can only play 1 card. Play this. It's great. It basically gives you 4 Ember on turn 1. Now, the counter argument against Treasure Map, you're not playing an artifact or a creature. Remember that artifacts and creatures enter play exhausted, which means that anything you put down turn 1 is ready for turn 2. So if I play a Terror, I can reap with it on turn 2. If I play a Mother, I can attack with it on turn 2. But if I play this, I don't have any artifacts, I don't have any creatures. Having said that, not having any creatures isn't always the worst thing in the world. You can play a card like Gateway to Dis, and then you destroy all the creatures, and if you've not got any, it doesn't hurt you as much. But number 1, ladies and gentlemen, this did win the poll over on Facebook quite convincingly. And honestly, this is the reason I came up with a video for this idea, seeing how great it is on turn 1. It's Ember Imp. It is so good on turn 1 that it made me want to do a video about the best cards on turn 1. It's a 2-power creature, meh. But while it's in play, your opponent cannot play more than 2 cards each turn. So you go first, you're only allowed to play 1 card. But then, if that card is Ember Imp, your opponent's only allowed to play 2 cards. Except, next turn you can play as many cards as you want, and if your opponent doesn't get rid of Ember Imp, then yeah, they still can only play 2 cards. And remember, you go first, they go second. They can play a creature, but they can't attack with it. Whoopsie daisy. So maybe they've got to wait another turn to attack. Now, obviously, there's all kinds of ways to get rid of this on turn 1. You can use soft landing, which lets you play a creature or artifact into play ready, and then you can attack. Or you can play Ammonia Cloud, which deals 3 damage to each creature. I don't know why, I'm just in the mood for giving Mars examples, apparently. So you can use what I term cheeky damage to get rid of this. You can use cards which ready creatures prematurely. But it's so good. And remember, this is a unique deck game. There's a decent chance you're playing against someone who either isn't playing a card, which allows them to get a turn 1 KO on Ember Imp going second, or they just don't draw into it. And if you can get Ember Imp out and keep it on the field for 2 or 3 turns, you are going to build up a significantly better board state, and it's going to be great. All right, ladies and gentlemen, they were my top 5 turn 1 cards going first, plus a few honourable mentions. But I want to hear from you guys. What's your favourite? And are there any that you think are great that I missed? I did leave off some of the suggestions from the Facebook group. This is my list after all. But if you think I missed any off that I shouldn't, let me know in the comment section. Go nuts, but please do remember the rule. Be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and follow me on Twitter @Wossy for some more action. But by far the most important thing as always is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Wossy Plays.